Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, misters and sisters, boys and girls, and comic fans and pop culture nerds everywhere. It's time once again for Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a comic book writer of nearly 4 decades in the field. You get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And as I said, what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get to our first question. Steve Lang, could you talk about the planning process for the Knightfall storyline? In particular, I've always been a big fan of the ninja suit that Batman wore, the Mask of Tengu, while he was reclaiming the mantle of the Bat. Who came up with that? Well, anyway, the process for Knightfall really began with Denny O'Neil. He laid down the framework. And by that, I mean basically the whole story in broad strokes. And the beauty of what he put down was it had all of these natural, dramatic high points and dramatic reveals and natural suspense situations and, all the stuff that you have to have in a saga, in a long story. And there were character arcs, and these were all built in. Like I said, it was broad strokes. I think the original Knightfall outline was only a handful of pages, which we read. Obviously, the associate editors and Doug Mensch and Alan Grant and myself. And this stuff was presented to us by Denny over the course of a morning at a Bat Summit. And as I've said before, I was only writing Robin at the time, so I'm sitting there like, why am I here? Maybe if somebody has a question about Robin, or obviously Robin's going to play a part in this, but this Knightfall isn't about Robin, so why am I here? And when we broke for lunch, Denny asked me to stay back to talk to me alone, and that's when he offered me Detective Comics, and that's when I enthusiastically said yes. I want to write Detective Comics. Of all the Batman titles there were, I wanted to write Detective Comics, especially after this awesome storyline that Denny had laid down. And the process after that was was over the course of several Bat Summits. I'm going to say 4 or 5 over the 2 years that Knightfall and Knight's Quest and Knight's End and Prodigal and all of that ran. It was, primarily Doug and Alan and I doing the writing, and we would work from Denny's broad strokes outline with Denny's guidance, along with Scott Peterson and Darren Vincenzo and Jordan Gorfinkel, and we would sit in some luxurious resort and map out issue by issue what we were going to do. Planning things like miniseries that would tie into it and specials that would tie into the story. And just, on a incredible number of whiteboards, just sort of draw out like the next 6 to 8 months of continuity. And we continued doing this through Contagion and Cataclysm and all the rest. And that really was the process. But Knightfall was just beautiful. It was just elegantly put together, a lot of fun to work on. Challenging, but a lot of fun to work on. And we had a great team. We all played well together. We all had egos, but we didn't let them get in the way. And Denny was, he was the guy to run things. And he chose Doug and Alan and I because we were reliable talents who were serious about our work and would get the stuff in on time, which was imperative on a project this big. And remember, this wasn't just appearing in the comic shops, it was also appearing on newsstands. And newsstand deadlines are unforgiving. You've got to meet those print dates. So Denny needed a solid team of both writers and artists, people he knew, could operate a calendar properly and keep up. And we did. And I think we had a lot of fun doing it. And I know I did. And that was really the process. It was just all of us, heads down, working together and cooperating with the able assistance of, Denny's merry band of associate editors who were all extremely talented in their own right. It it was a once in a lifetime experience. I think a once in a lifetime gathering of talents. Absolutely perfect and suited to the task, and I'm honored to have been a part of it. Now, Tengu, I kind of think Tengu was my idea. You know, when you do this stuff and it's a cooperative, you kind of lose track of whose idea was what. I mean, I clearly remember Doug took over the healing of Bruce Wayne, Dr. Kinsolving and all that stuff, and that was his part of things. But I kind of think Tengu, I read about the Tengu, the Japanese forest demon, in a book somewhere, and it might have been me who suggested it. And it seemed perfect to have Batman have another guise based on ninjas. It just seemed to fit the Batman thing. And what cements in my mind that I might have been the one to create Tengu was that I used him, I think, more than anybody else. I was really into the martial arts aspect of Batman in addition to his detective skills. And it might have been me, although I can't say for sure. That other character they created during Night Quest, that other persona for Bruce Wayne while he was in recovery, and the name of which I cannot remember, I believe that was a Denny creation. I'm almost certain that was a Denny creation. You see, we were all putting in our 2 cents, all, bringing what we had to the table to create this stuff. And when you're doing that in a cooperative atmosphere, you forget who did what. You really do. Other than the creation of Bane, which was specifically Graham and I can't really say for certain who thought of what first in the Knightfall saga. Except that it all began with Denny. John Morgan Neal, hey Morgie. Why did Western and war movies wane and crime and gonzo action movies rise? Well, the Western had a long run. I love Westerns, but they had a long run, and then their run ended with a bunch of crappy Westerns. So, every once in a while they'll go back and make a Western, but, for the most part, that long cycle lasting from the 1930s into the early 1970s, it's over. It's probably over forever, as I said, very sadly, because Westerns are my favorite genre. It ran its course. As far as war movies, war movies were a staple growing up, and in the 60s and 70s, they moved into sort of World War II action adventure movie, typified by The Dirty Dozen or Where Eagles Dare and things like that. And I quite frankly don't know why that trend didn't continue, because those things were generally always popular, although expensive to make. And, who doesn't love a movie where, the Nazis are the bad guys? They're just the greatest bad guys ever created by history. But with, the Vietnam War and stuff like that, the media convinced us that we were so sad about the Vietnam War that we just didn't want to watch war movies for entertainment anymore. And then once the Vietnam War was over, Hollywood started making a whole bunch of Vietnam War movies, and none of them were feel-good movies. None of them were adventure aspect movies. They were, anti-war movies, which, any good war movie is anti-war. Even the Boys' Own Adventure war movies like Where Eagles Dare and Guns of Navarone show the horrors of war. That it's not a picnic in the park. So we got this spate of Platoon and Hamburger Hill and Full Metal Jacket and Born on the 4th of July and all these other movies, feel bad movies about Vietnam. And I think that kind of ended the whole war movie genre forever, until we completely leave reality and the Gonzo war movie, the Gonzo war movie, the Gonzo action movie arrives. And I think that the Gonzo movie took over because of these were star driven. You were going to see an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. You were going to see a Stallone movie. You were going to see Jean-Claude Van Damme or Chuck Norris or whoever. And I think that's the reason for the Gonzo War movie, you had for some reason in the 80s, you had the big He-Man, super macho star, and they would come up with, increasingly violent situations to throw them into. And, these movies, as much as I love them, are by no means serious. Even if they are set in Vietnam or whatever, they go back to the adventure aspect of war and crime fighting and all the rest of it. But have sort of a comic book feel to them. These characters are super heroic. They're bulletproof. They're practically immortal, and we just want to see them kick ass. And maybe that's a generational thing. Maybe the movie-going audience at that time was of an age that this is the kind of movie they wanted to see: a badass hero, indefatigable, just mowing down bad guys, by the bushel load. And, again, that's the Gonzo action film has, kind of run its course, or it's kind of melded into the superhero movies. I think that's pretty easy to see. And then now there's like an unholy mix of the Gonzo action film and the superhero movie. I'm looking at you, Fast and Furious franchise, where your characters perform, superhuman, death-defying stunts, as regularly as clockwork in those movies. So it's all been amped up. Every action film has been amped up to Gonzo level these days. I'd like to get back to seeing, you occasionally see, especially from foreign producers, straight up war flicks. And there's been a number of them about, Afghanistan. But I think the war genre, like the Western, is something we're looking in the rearview mirror at. Again, sadly. Jackie Wolf, are you able to share details of your Punisher 2099 pitch? I didn't finish your question. And do you know if Mike B was also asked to submit one? I don't think Mike Barron did. I know it was me, Warren Ellis, who got the nod, and I think one other guy. By the time Punisher 2099 rolls around, Barron was on the outs with Marvel. He was not. He preceded me out the door as a persona non grata for basically being an individual. My pitch for Punisher 2099 was far different than what they used. My character was, he began life raised on an asteroid farm, the asteroid belt between Earth and Mars. And he had his family, he was part of like a family of asteroid miners. So he had parents and he had a wife and he had kids, and they were, mining asteroids for ore, and it's a tough life, living in this extremely hostile environment. So this guy grows up tough, and some corporate entity or whatever, I can't remember what, decides that they want to claim the mining rights, claim jumpers basically, and they kill all of the lead character's family, and unfortunately for them, leave this one guy alive. And I believe I might have given him bionic legs or something like that, and he's severely injured in this attack on the asteroid belt and his family, and he's left for dead, and recovers with the aid of a couple of robots. I remember he had like robotic assistants. I wrote this pitch a long time ago, and so then he comes to Earth looking for payback. And that was his motivation, revenge. He was going to get revenge. He'd never been to Earth, which I thought was an interesting aspect. And so he's a total fish out of water when he arrives. But he quickly figures out who is behind the death of his family and goes hunting for them. And of course, being a Punisher character, creates all of his own problems. And insane action follows. Now, I did get to work on Punisher 2099. I wrote the last 4 issues of the series. They brought me in to play cleanup. And it was fun. It was fun to work on. For me, it had sort of a 2000 AD feel. And I tried to do what the 2000 AD writers did and sort of have a little bit of social satire mixed in and lots of sci-fi concepts. As many as I could cram into one story thrown at the reader. Try to create a believable, intriguing future. Now, I wrote what was going to be the last 2 final issues of Punisher 2099, but the door slammed before those 2 issues could be published. It was a 2-part story drawn by Kike Alcatena, and it features Daddy Wronglegs. It was one of my favorite villains I've ever created. He was he's sort of addicted to mutating himself. He was a bad guy. And he captures this, I can't even remember this Punisher character's name, but he captures our hero, and basically gene splices him to some sort of bizarre alien genome. And for a while, this character is morphed into a really creepy looking dude with too many limbs. But if you ever want to see the last 2 issues, or what was to be the last 2 issues as drawn by Kike Alcatena, you can look for it on chuckdixon.net. I have repros of the original artwork up there for you to see, so you can see what might have been the last 2 issues of Punisher 2099. Craig Giles, who are your top 5 slob heroes? I love the term, and we need to do more to get it. We need to do more to get it into pop culture. Can we get your official definition of a slob hero? I personally love John McClane, Frank Castle, Han Solo, Chuckles, and Wildcat. Willis is kind of, I don't know, for me, the reigning, no longer, but for a long time was the reigning king of the slob hero. And what the slob hero is he's got a lot of, I guess he's what we would call toxically masculine now. He's a loner, doesn't care much. He doesn't care what anybody thinks, which is an aspect of having high testosterone. Doesn't care what anybody thinks, lives life on by his own rules, by his own code. And he's, I think, intrinsically an American character, the slob hero. And he kind of represents all of us. He's a populist wish fulfillment figure of a guy who just doesn't give a crap. He's not going to let anybody push him around. And he's going to do whatever he's going to do. And he also, he's never highly educated, but he's intuitive, has a lot of common sense, and is generally, he's usually cynical about the world. He sees the world the way it really is. He's not a romantic figure, generally, unless it's tragically romantic. But who are my top 5 slob heroes? Well, Bogart was, I think, the ultimate slob hero. No matter what he was in, even if he was in a movie where he was among sophisticated company, he was always the disruptor. He was the guy off the streets. He was the tough-minded individual who just didn't take any crap, had no pretensions, and didn't suffer any pretensions from anybody else. Whether he was playing a private detective or a nightclub owner or a gangster, Bogey was always he always spoke for us in the movie. He always said what was on our mind. And, the list of Bogart one-liners where he just eviscerates, people who are full of themselves, the list goes on and on. But, I think that was Bogart's charm, in the golden years of his career, was playing that guy who just didn't take any crap. Rocky, obviously, off the streets, uneducated guy, lovable. He's got, lower middle class values. Stallone had a lot of fun portraying this character as a guy who has a good heart, and but he never leaves the street behind. He never has any dreams of grandeur outside of the boxing ring. He's satisfied with being comfortable. Even when he has money, he's not real sure how to spend it. And he spends it unwisely, like all of us would. And, Stallone and his South Philly roots and everything else, this character is true to that. A character we love. And again, a character who speaks for the everyday guy, who says what's on our mind, even if it's awkward in the situation. Not a guy who reads the room before he evinces his opinion. And, that's what makes the character so endearing for me. Almost anybody Kurt Russell plays is a slob hero for the most part. And again, as Snake Plissken or MacReady or any of the other many characters, Captain Ron that he played, he's a populist hero. He speaks for us. He just seems like a regular guy and not necessarily concerned about his appearance, certainly not concerned about what anybody thinks of him. I think in the movie The Thing, he's one of those characters where you learn everything about him by one simple gesture. When he pours his drink into the keyboard of the computer when he loses a chess game, we kind of learn everything we need to know about him. It's like this guy is the ultimate slob hero. Another one, this might come as a surprise. Samwise Gamgee is a slob hero. He's a middle class guy. He's got no interest in intellectual pursuits. He's got a job to do and he's going to do it. He's going to make sure that Mr. Frodo makes it to Mordor. If he has to carry him, and he's often more concerned with what's for dinner as opposed to the more lofty concerns of the party around him, and the way he speaks and his mannerisms, both in the movies and in the book, you just fall in love with this character and you relate to this character because, of all these fantastical, elves and orcs and wizards and all the rest of it, this guy seems like a guy, you wouldn't mind taking a long car ride with, you could talk to this guy. There's nothing lofty about it. And I think as a slob hero in the trilogy, he really helps to ground it in reality, and he brings a pathos to Lord of the Rings. You have all this, amazing stuff, good versus evil and everything else, but Samwise somehow makes it all feel real. I remember the terrific scene where he talks to Frodo in their most dire moment about elephants, and he's referring to elephants, and how he doesn't think he'll ever get to see one. In other words, he's saying that he thinks they will not survive this adventure. And it's an amazingly touching scene from a character who's not articulate, but manages better than any of the characters in the novel to articulate the fix they're in and the stakes they face, just by his bemoaning the fact that he will never get to see an elephant. Now, the slobbiest of slob heroes, and there's lots of them in spaghetti westerns, is Trinity, as played by Terrence Hill. This guy can't even be bothered to get on his horse. He eats right out of the skillet. He bathes with his clothes on. I mean, come on. He is the embodiment of the slob hero, the toxic male. And talk about a character that doesn't give a crap. Trinity really takes the cake, or takes the tortilla, or any other food that is left around unattended. Cool Guy 9000. In your last video, you talked about how gimmicks are sometimes used as a replacement for actual characterization. My question is Two-Face's double-headed coin a gimmick, or is it actually used for good storytelling? This is a good question. The Two-Face, like most of the great Batman villains, is a theme character. He's right out of Dick Tracy. Bill Finger and Bob Kane were very much influenced by Chester Gould's work. So, the Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, Catwoman are very much like the theme villains that Gould created for Dick Tracy, flat top, prune face, the blank. So, but Two-Face is very cleverly created because, he's obviously a tragic figure. He's obviously psychotic. He has this obsession with the number 2. And he's got that coin, that silver. If you have never read a Two-Face story, he has a silver dollar with 2 heads, Liberty heads, and one side is scarred like half of his face. And he'll use the coin to decide, when he comes to a crossroads in his life, he lets the coin decide what decision he's going to make. Will this character live or die? Will we rob this bank or that bank? Whatever. And to me, it's not a gimmick. It is a gimmick, but it is used for dramatic and suspenseful effect because often a character's life depends on how that coin falls. That's pretty good stuff. And it's indicative of how nuts the guy is, that he would be willing to commit a cardinal sin based on, how a coin falls. This is the one character that I had a disagreement with Denny over, although I always bowed to Denny's judgment, Denny's characterization. I always thought that Two-Face, if he didn't like the way the coin fell, he would find a way to justify doing what he wanted to anyway. He would never allow the flip of the coin to thwart his original intentions. But then he thought that he would. He thought he was crazy enough. Yeah, he is going to hard and fast go by the rules he set down for himself. And I was like, that's not how psychos operate. But it's a comic book character, and that was Denny's take, and I never did anything to violate it. Although were I to write the character now, I'd do it my way. But I didn't resent it because it's like, okay, this is consistent with the portrayal of the character up to this point, so I'm not going to change it. But yeah, is it a gimmick? Yeah. Is it a great gimmick? Yeah, it's a great gimmick. Very, very cool. Green Adrenaline 6405. Do publishers have some kind of special incentive clause with royalties for writers who work on 100 issues in a row on a run similarly to how television shows are with syndication after 100 episodes air? I say this because you were on your way to 100 with Robin up until issue 86 when Ed Brubaker took over briefly for the Officer Down crossover event, thus ending your streak. Yeah, Officer Down. I remember very little about Officer Down. We didn't have 100 issue bonuses because very rarely would anybody write 100 issues of anything. And today, forget about it. Some writers are lucky to write 5 issues of anything before it's either canceled or they're replaced. They did, however, have what they called continuity contracts. So if you were a writer on a book and you were selling and they wanted to keep you there for the sake of consistency, you would be basically given a contract for 12 issues. And if you completed those 12 issues, within the time allotted, you would be paid for a 13th issue that you didn't write. In addition to that, generally, if you were the regular writer on a book with a continuity contract, you would also write an inventory issue, a standalone story that would be drawn and ready in case there was some problem, and it could be inserted in the schedule in case, a artist fell behind or something else. So, in effect, you were being paid to write 14 issues a year, and but you only had to write 13 of them. The bonus was the pay for an extra issue at the end of your continuity contract. Now on Robin, I had lots of these. Every year was a new continuity contract. Same on Detectives, same on Nightwing, same on Birds of Prey, same on Green Arrow. So, a nice little bonus at the end of the year, a little Christmas bonus. Depending on how many books you've written that year, it could be pretty decent. Now, the reason why I didn't write, I think you asked a question coming up about my further feelings about not getting to write that issue tied into Officer Down. And yep. Green Adrenaline, you get a twin spin. All right, your follow-up question. Were you annoyed by that decision to replace you for one issue, or was just a pretty standard thing you knew would probably happen given how the comic business works? Now, my memories of Officer Down were that it was kind of a mess. It wasn't editorially driven. One of the writers in the room decided they were going to tell us what to do. Freelancers generally, resent being told by another freelancer what to do. You really want to look to an editor who might have answers to all your questions. But it was Officer Down was kind of dictated. And because it was dictated by a freelancer, that freelancer reserved all the good parts of the story for himself. So we reached a point where, I talked about Knightfall and how we would break down each issue. Well, Knightfall broke down so well, and because there were no overriding egos involved, everybody got a good part of the story. Alan, Doug, and I all got to write awesome parts. Every issue of Knightfall to me was incredible because we were advancing this incredible story, and we all got, good stuff. We got good meaty scenes. We all got our share of good reveals and dramatic turns and character bits and all the rest of it. So it was very evenly distributed. In Officer Down, that was not the case. There was a lot of, issues where lots of things happened, and they were generally assigned to the writer who came up with the idea. And the other issues were all exposition. They were all the boring parts of the story people usually skip. And I think I remember saying to the editor at the time, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this issue of Robin. I don't understand, there's no drama here. There's no real story progression. There's no moments. It's a lot of yakety yak, 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 a lot of exposition. There's not even any interesting police procedural investigating going on here. It's a lot of wheel spinning. If you watch series done for streaming TV, you know what I mean. You'll have whole episodes that just seem to spin their wheels for no reason because the producers contracted for 10 episodes and only had enough story for 6. I think Officer Down had enough story for about 3 comics, but it was spread out over the whole line of Batman books. And I simply didn't know what to write. And so they had Brubaker write it, which, fine with me. Ed's a good guy. I never read the issue, so I don't know what it was like. Now, having the 100 issue run interrupted, that's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not that OCD. I got to write a lot of Robin. So, hey, it's a triple spin for Green Adrenaline. Okay, lastly, since you worked ahead during your time at DC, do you remember writing an actual Robin 86, and did that story ever get released or make its way into another series you worked on? Now, generally, this was Robin 86, as written by Ed Brubaker. This is Robin 87, the issue that followed. Generally, I worked so far ahead that I could work crossovers like this into my run if I had to, just by moving things around. Now, I don't remember what happened in this instance, but I remember in a particular instance in Nightwing, I had to write a standalone issue. We had an arc going, and a big crossover, I think it was 1 million, was going to drop right in the middle of that arc and interrupt it. And so what I did was I wrote a standalone Nightwing issue to run before the arc began, and that sort of bumped everything along so that 1 million appeared between that standalone issue and the beginning of the next multi-issue arc. And that may have been what I did here. I really don't remember. But like I said, it wasn't heavy lifting to do something like that because I worked so far ahead. There was no time crunch. I was probably a good 6 months ahead of my artist on Robin at this point. And so it really wasn't that much of a hassle. The only hassle was, I just didn't know what they wanted in Robin 86. It was very, there wasn't a lot to do there. And at that point, Denny was gone. All of Denny's associate editors were gone. And the group editor on Batman was, as I've often referred to, indifferent. So really didn't care to help me at all. Not that I'm a writer who generally asks for help, but when I asked for help, I was just told, we'll just have Ed write it, since you're, bereft of ideas, which wasn't the case, but I think that's how they phrased it at the next editorial meeting. Chuck's out of ideas. Ace Mowick, got to throw you a Western question, another Western question. Throw you a Western question if you need one for an episode. Have you read Man from the Great North, also known as Jesuit Joe by Hugo Pratt? It functions like a Western, but set in Canada. If so, what are your thoughts? Yes, I have read. In fact, I had a copy of Jesuit Joe, I believe in Italian, for years before before Dean Mullaney published a version, an excellent version in English. It's a Western, even though it's set in Canada. It's set during the period time of Westerns, I think during the 1880s. And it features a rather psychotic Canadian Mountie. It's one of my favorite Hugo Pratt works in that there's not a lot of dialogue. It's largely visually told, but it's bleak. I mean, it's Cormac McCarthy bleak, because Jesuit Joe, the lead character, not wrapped too tight. But it's I think it's some of Pratt's best work, and like I said, it kind of reads like a demented Dell comic, and because a lot of 6-panel grids, which if you've watched these videos, I just love a good 6-panel grid, and yeah, it's good stuff, but bleak, not the feel good comic of the year. J.R. Nuto, I am wondering if your latest Conan novels are set between any specific REH tales. I'm a Conan chronology nerd, so somewhat obsessive about how I catalog my collection. I'm not as big on the scholarship of the Hyborian Age as some Conan writers. I think I'm the anti-Roy Thomas when it comes to that. There's two ways of writing Conan, and I think both are valid. There is the Roy Thomas way of staying with the Howard chronology and history, and trying to fit the stories exactly into those histories. And I can't say anything bad about that, because Roy's the guy. I don't know how many of us would even be talking about Conan now if it wasn't for Roy Thomas's insistence that Marvel give Conan a shot as a Marvel character. It's because of the comics we remember him. Yes, the Lancer paperbacks sold a ton, but the comic is really what put Conan back into the pop culture arena and why he's around today. So I'm, approaching it the way Roy Thomas did is worthy of praise. And we should all be grateful for that. But I kind of write Conan the other way. Just standalone adventures, geared toward basically motorcycle gang members and maybe convicts doing 20 in prison. I kind of write them as casual reads, not scholarly works. But I'm very serious about them. It doesn't mean that I'm throwing everything away. And my novels are generally based, and you can probably pretty easily fit them into the chronology, because I do look at the chronology and I do figure out, well, okay, he was a mercenary in Koth at this time. So that's, I want to write a mercenary story. So he's going to be a Kothian. He's going to be a mercenary working for a rebel Kothian prince in this novel. And in the next novel, he's riding across the Zuagir with a bunch of desert bandits. And that fits into this part of his career. And, coming up, he's a mercenary for the Nemedians, fighting the Aquilonian legions. That's in the third novel that I'm currently writing. And that fits into the chronology. So, and, place names and character names and everything else, all kinds of things that Howard created, I put in there. And more importantly to me than anything is, the map, making sure the map works. Yeah, I've got a lot of crap over the years for having the media have a navy. But I'll say again, Austria has a navy, and it's just as landlocked. Austria had a submarine force in World War I, for gosh sakes. So, but anyway, well, let's get past that. The other thing important to me, probably of ultimate importance to me, is Howard's language. I don't copy Howard's language, but I restrict myself so there's no anachronisms. I restrict myself to the lexicon used by Howard, and when that doesn't work, I come up with words or find words that will fit without seeming out of place. I don't want to write anachronistic stuff, even though the Hyborian Age is made up and God knows how they talked. I try to keep the dialogue in a line with Howard's, and I kind of like writing that way, where it's a little bit stilted, but sometimes you can use the pretensions in the dialogue or the over-articulation of dialogue for humor. And not comedy, but humor. Conan is sometimes unintentionally funny, and also stay with the direct, brutal nature of Howard's writing and the world he created. So I'm trying to write the best pastiche that I can and introduce concepts that are comfortably fit inside of Howard's world, but maybe are a little different than what he would have done. Maybe, I like to imagine, and it's probably really a lot of hubris on my part, but I try to imagine these as the stories Howard might have written, if he had lived longer. So, but yeah, I mean, that's my approach. So yeah, I'm serious about it, but I'm not serious to a level of scholarship. And I think that if you're a Conan scholar and you know his timeline, you can pretty quickly place these stories on that timeline within the first few pages. Hey, speaking of Conan, and I have, Siege of the Black Citadel is out right now. It's at Amazon. It's also available at Barnes & Noble. It is also available directly from Archaven. I'll put the link below in comments. And if you order it from Archaven, you not only get the paperback, but you get the free ebook version. And for right now, it's the only way you can get the ebook version, if that's the way you read your fiction. So, if you need to contact me with questions, suggestions, whatever you got, I love hearing from people. Contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. Of course, you can leave messages right here under the video, but I might miss them. You can contact me on Facebook or Twitter, but I might miss them. But I never miss anything that shows up at brunobookstore@gmail.com. And, hey, I'm not going to keep secrets from you. I put you on my email mailing list, let you know about stuff I have coming up that you might otherwise never learn about. So that's it. That's it for me this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, subscribing, whatever it is you do to help spread the word about my little show here. And I will see all of you, hopefully, down the road.